to respect everybody's time. Hopefully, everybody has coffee, tea, water, anything that allows you to be present. So let's get ourselves started today. As we are talking, we want this event to be engaging. So please feel free to use the chat, connect with colleagues, make new connections, drop in contact information. We would love to hear and see who's with us. So throughout the day, if you're from a school district, a campus, a university, or college, feel free to drop it in. If you're a community member, please feel free to drop that in as well. We want to see who is here with us today. So let's get ourselves started for our special event of Train the Trainers Best Practices for Supporting Foster Youth Students. Let's do an introduction. Who is talking to you, right? You might be wondering that. Hello, everybody. Good morning. My name is Hugo K. I am the 10,000 Degrees College Access Program Director for Marin and Contra Costa Counties. I've been with 10,000 Degrees as a full-time staff, going to my 11th year this summer. But one of the unique parts and why I'm really excited to be here is I am an alumni of 10,000 Degrees myself. They supported me when I was in high school many years ago. We don't need to do that math. But one of the pieces that's important for me is being able to share all of this amazing information and resources to our community members. So that's one of the items I'm really excited about today. I'll pass the mic over to Samantha.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. My name is Samantha Fao, or Sam for short. I'm one of the program managers here at 10,000 Degrees, and I work specifically on our college success side with our scholars attending four-year universities. Unfortunately, I have not been here as long as Hugo. I am approaching my 2 years in September, but really excited to be part of this panel and also to have our panelists here today to share their expertise, and all of you for joining us this early. So I will go ahead and pass it to Julissa to introduce herself.
Good morning, everyone. Super excited to be here. My name is Julissa Vargas. I work as one of our fellows in the college success team. I have had the opportunity to be with 10,000 Degrees for the past 3 years and work with a lot of foster youth. So I'm super excited to be part of this conversation. And honestly, there's no better month to do it than the Foster Care Awareness Month. Thank you. And I'll go ahead and pass it on to Hugo.
Fantastic. Thank you, team, for that introduction. So just to go an overview of today, we'll be sharing a little bit of who we are, who 10,000 Degrees is, and we do have a special welcome from our CSAC partners, Dr. Daisy Gonzalez, as well as Michael Limas. You'll get to hear from them in a few. We'll share of why we are here. We want to highlight that 10,000 Degrees, we are a resource of a lot of amazing resources for our students, specifically for our foster youth. But we are not the experts, and which is why we wanted to include all of these amazing voices today. So we'll be sharing a little bit more about that in a few. And of course, to what we're all excited about, hear from our panelists. The work that they do, the initiatives that they take on, but then have an open conversation around everything that we may all be wondering, but how to best support our students. And of course, time giving, share with you all some resources that we are also excited to pass on after today's event. So for those who don't know 10,000 Degrees, maybe you've heard of us before, or this is your first interaction with us, welcome. We welcome you. 10,000 Degrees is a college access and success nonprofit organization. We've been in our communities for over 40 years. And our main goal and mission is to support students to and through college, regardless of where they're at right now, regardless of where they're thinking they're going to be. We want to make sure that they have their options available, they know what they are, and we are one of the amazing organizations and community members that are here to support them along that way. So our mission is to achieve educational equity and to support students from low-income backgrounds to and through college, as I highlighted, to realize their full potential and possibly impact their communities and the world. However small or big that world may be to that student, we want to make sure that they got it. So a few items I keep highlighting to and through. Our team members do an amazing job. You're going to hear from Sam and Julissa throughout the conversation today. There are managers and our fellows working directly with students, but we have a team of over 30 staff members within our Bay Area, including Utah, supporting students around college pathways, awareness, preparation, and ensuring that they know the right resources on financial aid, and our CSAC partners know very well, financial aid is one unique bubble to everything around our students. And so this couple years have been unique, and we are one of the many resources to make sure the students know what their options are and work with them and their families to that next step. We're also a scholarship organization, so we do provide funds for students in our partner regions. We do have a few of those team members here today. So if you have questions about our scholarship, feel free to drop in your contact information, and I'm happy to also pass that information to our scholarship department. One of the unique items that we really focus on is to support our community college transfer students. We want to make sure that those students get all the resources that they have available to them so they can transfer successfully with less amount of debt and, of course, sooner than later. And one of the unique parts about our programming, we have introduced a career and graduate school readiness partnership within our teams, helping students explore careers, internships, and really what does life look like after my first degree, right? We know we don't always talk about that. Students don't always have those conversations. So we have an amazing team that helps students navigate that journey. And of course, our alumni programming. And we have an array of team members who are here working with us, but also within the community that can connect students. So just a little bit about what we do and who we are. So next slide, please, Nydia. So as I mentioned, we are in 8 counties, including Utah, 8 specifically Bay Area counties, over 300 high school partners where we are connecting with, supporting. We have our Access staff members in these regions, supporting all of our seniors and juniors, soon to be seniors. We work closely with 57 community colleges, and we have students in over 194 four-year universities nationwide. So our reach is broad, which is why we're also very excited for you to be here and be part of that reach as well. So with that being said, I want to pass my mic over to Dr. Daisy Gonzalez for some welcoming remarks.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Hugo. And I'm so grateful to be here with all of you. I want to make sure that I recognize the entire team at 10,000 Degrees, and a big shout out to Christopher Gonzalez, who's been a part of our statewide implementation work group this year. It has been an incredible 10 months for me as I serve in this new role statewide, and I know that I couldn't do it without Christopher and the entire team here at 10,000 Degrees. I have the honor of joining you this morning with some other colleagues from the California Student Aid Commission. So I want to recognize Michael and Shelveen, who are here from the CSAC team. They have been critical statewide as a part of our Train the Trainer model. And then for me to be able to join you here as a former foster youth and someone who, number one, is an eternal optimist, no matter what I have survived in life, someone who is centered in connecting systems. I have had so many jobs, and I'll share a little bit about that in my introduction of myself and how I got here. But at the end of the day, I consider myself a systems linker. I like to link systems that are disconnected because I have survived so many of those systems. And I am an unapologetic student-centered leader. So the work that I do it because of what I have lived. And to be here with all of you this morning is centered in the journey of many foster youth, many who I consider sisters and brothers, many who are still in the foster care system. And, you know, when I was going through high school, I would wake up every day knowing that many of the adults that served me knew, and they would say it very vocally, you will never live beyond the age of 15. That's what I grew up knowing every single day, that they expected me to end up dead, in prison, or pregnant. And that being dead was the lucky few foster youth that could make it. I also grew up knowing that not many foster youth graduated from high school. In fact, today, only 64% of foster youth in California graduate from high school. When I was in high school, I also knew that only 3% of foster youth went to a four-year university. That percent is now 4%. And the majority of foster youth were actually served by a community college. I'm sharing this with you because these are our foster youth outcomes out of education. And financial aid is critical. So the work that you are about to do today is that lifeline. It is that ticket to help foster youth get into higher education. But we also need to understand the foster youth journey. Many foster youth, in fact, in the state of California, have 5 or more placements I had 4. Many of them are 3 times more likely to be homeless. I ended up homeless at the age of 16. 40% of those students in California's community colleges, when we did our survey, some of you know that I served California's community colleges for 6 years. 40% of the students in our basic needs survey were actually foster youth or had some interaction with the foster care system. And so when we look at this work, we also understand the broader context of what has happened to these students that we are now seeking to serve and to heal. 1 in 5 California inmates were actually in foster care. That's the context and the landscape in which we do this work. And I'm sharing this with you because surviving all of these things, not just for me, but for all the foster youth, is not a simple task. And so my message for you this morning is actually very simple. Higher education access depends on our ability to create healing spaces for foster youth in higher education. So when you survive foster care, a K-12 education system where you are unlikely to make it to a 4-year university, when you survive healthcare systems, certainly every single foster youth in this state has to go through mental health services. Sometimes they are positive, sometimes they are negative situations. And for many, they survive a juvenile justice system, a correctional system that's deeply connected to placement of many foster youth in this state. So you are those bright lights. You are the bright lights that can help students get to, number 1, believing in themselves. And that's really my message for you this morning. I am now about to turn 40. I am the executive director of the California Student Aid Commission. I have been in this role for the last 10 months, but I spent the first 5 months creating a strategic plan because I come from actually the classroom. I was a 3rd grade teacher right out of college. I wanted to become the people that inspired me. And I had an incredible 3rd grade teacher. It was a 3rd grade teacher who taught me English because I was actually a Spanish speaker until the 3rd grade. Eventually ended up in the classroom and realized that the systems, the way that we were funding K-12 was not helping me serve my students. I ended up in the state capitol. So I worked both for the Assembly Budget Committee and the Assembly Appropriations Committee for many years. And for those of you who know legislation or are thinking about changing the world, you know that everything is about, can we afford it, especially today. And then I spent the last 6 years working for the California Community College System, 116 colleges, 73 districts, where I became the youngest deputy chancellor, the first Latina and the first woman in that role, only to then become the first Latina interim chancellor for the entire system by the age of 32. But I'm here because I spent the last 5 months with a very clear vision. I made the jump to this space, number 1, because I like to solve problems. And so when I was thinking about community colleges, that was not the problem. I had already created an online college, a whole entire new financial system to fund community colleges. We had implemented online education, expanded the Next Up program through the entire set of colleges. That was no longer the problem. The problem was financial aid. So that's why I'm here with you today. It's why I serve as the executive director. And I can tell you that we need a college affordability plan in the state of California. We can't just help students survive systems. We need to systematically create pathways in higher education that actually help a student get through that ivory tower door. We can't just create the enrollment component of it. We need to fund it because many students, especially foster youth, will not be able to enroll. That's just the truth. And even if they do, they end up in debt. Or like many of my foster youth students when I taught at Stanford and UC Santa Barbara, they'll go 1 semester and they end up leaving and they go back to the community college system to serve them. I am still that optimist because of people like you. I had an incredible bus driver who would wait for me every morning so I wouldn't miss that school bus. I had incredible professors and teachers. But the work that I do and the badges of honor that I wear are really my experience as a foster youth, as an English learner, as a first-generation college student, as that community college alum, because I wouldn't be here without community colleges. And yes, while I earn advanced degrees, I think the most important badge that I carry in any room is that journey of understanding what all of our foster youth have gone through, which is we experience systems that sometimes don't serve us. We experience a journey and then we have to survive them and then heal from that. So here are my 3 tips as you're entering your day and you're thinking about financial aid. I grew up in foster care since the age of 2, but I didn't know it until I was 4. And I have very clear, vivid memories. And what I can tell you is, number 1, when working with the foster youth, trust is earned. We need to understand that when a foster youth opens up and shares their journey, the most important thing that you can do is share yours back. And it doesn't have to look the same way, but it is a basic interaction of humanity. Some of us grew up with a lot of violence where the adults were not the people that protected us. That was certainly my experience. But the most important part of that story that I want you to hear and that you will find across many foster youth is that they were the adults, which means trust is earned. They were the adults, so we have to treat them like adults. My second advice for you is that when we serve foster youth, we seek to empower. We need to understand where they are in their journey of healing, and serving them has to come from a place of mentorship. So we put on that mentorship lens. Let me give you an example. I was on a panel about foster youth about 3 years ago, and it was actually an organization that did a lot of mentorship. And they were explaining how sometimes foster youth, one mentor experience was that this foster youth needed a lot of extra support. And they always wanted things. They always wanted extra chips or extra food. And what I was hearing from this mentor was, and you don't always cave in. They don't need the extra bag of chips. And so I said, pause. I was on a panel and I said, pause. If we're seeking to empower, why would we question whether that foster youth needs an extra bag of chips? I'm giving it to you at the most elemental form, right? So for example, what happens when this foster youth can't get you that signed signature? Or they might need you to tweak institutional policies. Those are all things we should be willing and able to do if we truly want to help. The time to understand and shift systems comes after. If we truly seek to empower, we have to be willing and able, because it connects us back to trust. It turned out that when we asked that foster youth who was being mentored by an adult who had never been in the foster care system, was that they were being bullied in their group home. And so the extra bag of chips was going for the bully in the group home. So I'm sharing this with you because we seek to empower, and sometimes it's not as clear. So when they perhaps don't follow certain things or they can't follow through with something, we seek to empower. The last bit of advice that I have for you is that silence doesn't mean defiance or apathy. These are students who fear sharing their plans because things have rarely worked out. I mentioned that I moved around 3 different times. I'm actually below the average in terms of placements. And it ultimately happened because I ended up having to testify against my own parents when I was 13. It's how I ended up homeless when I left the foster care system, and I ended up in a really violent group home, and then eventually emancipated at 17. These are the students you're trying to serve. And I hope that today, in being here with all of you, you can see that healing is a journey, but it's absolutely possible. And it's because of the work that you are about to do today. California is bouncing back. I can tell you that in the last 10 months, because of 10,000 Degrees and organizations like them and the entire CSEC team, we are now number 5 in the country. It's not a number that I am impressed by, not proud yet. Here's why. Because it means that we're still missing approximately 55% of students are completing a FAFSA or a CADA, which means we can do better, right? What happened to the other 45? So we are excited to be number 5. We have never been number 5. And it's important that as you engage today, you understand that there are a lot of new resources for foster youth in the state. From Cal Grant to Cal Grant with Student Dependence and Chafee, these are all resources that your foster youth can access. There are also institutional resources, and many of you are the experts in those. I saw some community college colleagues, EOPS, Next Up, Rising Scholars. These are all the same systems and programs that serve the same population. You also know that we're headed to our September 2nd deadline. And so I want to say thank you for hosting this event, for doing this work, and knowing that today and the work that you do is about growing optimism and serving students and building a community of hope and healing. With that, Hugo, I know I've eaten up more of the time, so I want to hand it back to you and just say thank you for the work that you all do here today.
No, thank you so much for those words, Dr. Gonzalez. It's a real gift for having you with us. Um, Looking at the chat, I echo what so many are saying. We are privileged by the words that you're sharing, your story, and we want to thank you for empowering us and grounding us, not just for today, not just for this event, but for tomorrow and the many years ahead. So thank you so much. I'll pass the mic over to Michael. I feel like you had some announcements, and so definitely want to give you that space for that as well.
Thank you, Ugo, and I'll be respectful of everyone's time because I know there's a couple more panelists here, but I just want to go ahead and say thank you to your team, Ugo, and all the wonderful work that you do at 10,000 Degrees. We've had the honor and privilege to work with you these past 3 or 4 years, and it's been truly inspirational just to see the impact that you have, not just in your region, but just across the state. So I want to start off there. And I'm going to actually just share 3 quick things with you all in terms of just a call to action and what you all can do to work further with us and just further collaborate as we approach the September 2nd deadline, which is our community college deadline for financial aid here for the FAFSA and the California DREAM Act application. So I'm hoping by now that you all are familiar with Cash for College. So we have statewide webinars and workshops happening across the state. 10,000 Degrees actually hosts a number of them. So please engage with those. I'll go ahead and pop in a link that's going to have the link to our webinars along with our in-person workshops. The other thing I want to mention is that we also have a Train the Trainer, and our Train the Trainer is a 3-hour training. It's all done via Zoom, so you can do it online at the comfort of your own space. And that is meant to go ahead and provide the baseline information that partners need for financial aid expertise. Here at CSAC, we consider ourselves the statewide financial aid expert when it comes to helping people understand how to apply for financial aid, whether that's through the FAFSA or the California DREAM Act. So I will also include that link in case any of you want to go ahead and engage with us. You also get a certificate from CSAC. So if that's something that you're looking forward to and you want to go ahead and utilize, we highly encourage you to register for that. And then the other thing I will share is that as we approach the September 2nd deadline, there's going to be ways to engage with us by sharing out our materials. So social media graphics, videos, one-pagers. So that's going to be in development, but I will share the social media toolkit hub so that you have access to that. And then the last thing I will also include in the chat is our link tree, and that has all of our important links. So you can go ahead and access our Cash for College offerings, our workshops, events. We have an all-in and ready webinar tomorrow, happening tomorrow morning, where we're going to go ahead and talk about our efforts through the April 2nd deadline, and then also our efforts towards the September 2nd deadline. And just to end off, I just want to express my attitude, my inspiration towards you all in terms of what you all are doing, and my inspiration towards the work that our students are doing. I want to go ahead and just echo really quickly what Dr. Gonzalez mentioned around healing. What we do and what you all are doing really contributes to generational healing, but it also contributes to building generational wealth. We're not just opening access, we're really breaking down doors and barriers that have existed through all these systems. And I just want to say that I'm truly inspired by you all and what we do here in California. So thank you. And with that, I'll pass it back to you.
Thank you, Michael, for that and the announcements. And yes, please share our community partners if you're here. If there's any resources you want to add to the chat, please do so. As we move forward on our agenda today, I'm gonna echo the words and recommendations you gave us, Dr. Gonzalez. Trust, empowerment, and silence is not a negative. What we have in front of us today is to name what we just heard, what we all know of what our students are navigating. The journey to college is not just a straight path. Many of you have your own journeys and stories of having to climb that mountain. And so, without going deep into each one of these buckets, because we heard it, we live it, we see it from our students, we want to acknowledge and name it at the end of the day. This is the journey of our students. And at times, we hear this often from my team. We echo it often with our teams that we don't know the impact that we have on students until maybe the next day or sometimes many years later when they're doing their own welcoming speech at an event like this or like others. So with that being said, thank you again, Dr. Daisy Gonzalez, to our team. And just because of time, we'll move on to the next piece of why we are also here, why 10,000 Degrees is excited for this conversation. We believe in all of our students to get to that next step. But as we heard, there are gaps. Our scholarship, roughly within our students, we have roughly 3% who happen to be foster youth or identified as foster youth. But we know there's more out there. We know there's more students who have goals, who have visions, who have want to go on to the next step. And not only do we need to continue to ask the question of how can we do more to get those percentages up, but we need your help as well along the way. So around between 115 students, we're awarding close to $216,000 in scholarships, but we want to see that number grow. Within 10,000 Degrees, many see our scholarship and just think, okay, it's just one scholarship. I may or may not get it, but we want to echo that we have so many other donor advised scholarships within our one application. And some of those are specifically for foster youth students in our communities. So if you're there working with students, whether they're in the first year in community college, whether they're starting to think about college and they're in high school, let them know that 10,000 Degrees has a lot more than just one scholarship, right? That we are so much more than just that. Because funds is one piece, the connections are another. But we want to highlight these partnerships that we have with our community members and ensure that students and that you all know that there's a team ready to support them along the way. And a big piece that you will hear in our panel in a few is we don't know who our students are sometimes because they don't self-identify. And as we heard, silence does not mean negative, right? It means that we need to do a better job also ourselves. So how can we be seen as a trusted ally for our students who are learning to trust others as well? And so with that being said, as we move forward with today's slides, we are going to be hitting some key terms. And so I just have them here. You can take a screenshot if you like. But I, for one, have learned so much over the year working with our foster youth community here in Marin County specifically. And so we want to make sure that we're grounding ourselves. So what do we mean by a foster youth, former foster youth, as well as those who are part of the foster care system? There's so many different definitions depending on education. If we're talking about that, if we're talking about the states and legislature, they're a little bit all over the place, which is okay. So feel free to take a screenshot. Again, just because of time, we are going to move forward with some of our goals for today as we continue. So our goal for you all, our audience, is to enhance understanding around the theme of supporting our foster youth community. Deep understanding of the unique experiences, challenges, strengths for our current and former students. Identify what are those system barriers. Many of you are working to tackle that on. And so maybe in today's conversation, we pick up a few best practices that we want to change maybe in our high schools, in our programmings, in our school systems to support our foster youth. Foster inclusive environments, talking a little bit how can we enhance that so students can see us and see a trusted identity, right? So we'll talk a little bit about that. Building collaborative networks. I think that's a big one, especially when we talk about our students farthest from opportunity. Letting them know that there are trusted adults, but also there's communities within their spaces that they can rely on. And how can we build those connections for those students? And then, of course, learn from our expert leadership. So we have amazing panelists that we are excited to introduce you to, as well as learn evidence-based strategies. So that is our goal for today. And as we transition over to the hearing from our panelists, we want to pause and no longer hear from me. We want to hear from our experts. So what we are going to do and transition into is hearing from our panelists. And so I have the privilege of introducing you all to Alex and Margot from CFPIC, and I'll let them share about their work and how they work with our foster youth community.
Thank you, Ugo. Good morning, everybody. My name is Margot Fudge. I'm the program director for the Youth Engagement Project, and we are part of the Child and Family Policy Institute of California. I have Alex Crossman here with me today, who is a lived expert of foster care, and really he's going to be the star of the show in terms of our presentation. So I'm just going to orient you a little bit to the work that we do and then turn it over to him. If you could go to the next slide, please. So really our presentation today is just how you can engage with lived experts of foster care to improve and change the foster care system. So listening to Dr. Gonzalez was extremely inspirational, and hearing her call out some of those system barriers that exist for children in care, whether it's placement moves, it's changes of school, all of those things impact the outcome. And so our organization really believes that in order to make system change, we need to be listening to those who experienced it firsthand. And so we're going to talk a little bit about how we work with lived experts and current and former foster youth to do that. Next slide, please. All right, so I already introduced myself, and I will, Alex will introduce himself when he does his slides, but he is an amazing young man and really an expert when it comes to achieving educational outcomes. I'm so excited for you guys to meet him in a moment. Next slide, please. All right, so a little bit about our program. We've been around for about 10 years. And like I said, we are under the umbrella of the Child and Family Policy Institute of California. We receive our funding from the California Department of Social Services to really improve child welfare policies and programs, both at the local as well as the state level. So we do that by engaging with current and former foster youth across the state, and they become consultants for our organization. We believe strongly in paying them for their expertise, and they are then matched with counties to help those counties improve their local system. Next slide, please. As you can see from this slide, we're currently working with 20 different counties across the state. Many of these are also including their educational partners in this work, because many of the counties have a focus on improving educational outcomes for youth in foster care. So if you are from a county that is not listed here, that means we're not currently working with you, and feel free to reach out to me to explore a potential partnership. We would love to increase that number from 20. But we do have a lot of counties participating in and around the Bay Area and Northern California, both urban and small, more rural counties. But the box to the right, you can see some of the focus areas that have been identified at the county level as priorities for them, as well as by youth. So you can see improved educational outcomes is on here, improving mental health supports for youth in care, improving placements, placement stability, all of those things, prevention, how do we keep youth with their families of origin whenever it's safe and possible to do so. So the counties and the youth are working on a number of different focus areas, just depending on their interest. Next slide, please. So just briefly to talk about some of our values and organizational interest at CFPIC, we have several programs that utilize the voice of lived experts to inform our work. We believe very strongly that bringing in lived experts is the best thing that we can do, and we want to embrace their expertise. So our program, the Youth Engagement Project, as well as our Preventing and Addressing Child Trafficking, or PACT, as well as our citizen review panels, all have hired lived experts to do this work with us, and to really help us improve the systems that these programs touch. So we can go to the next slide, please. And then I'm just going to touch on briefly, before I turn it over to Alex, some of our principles that guide the work to leverage lived expertise. And so really making an organizational commitment. Sometimes that requires a culture shift. For those that work in this space, we know that sometimes systems are built to keep people in positions of power that do not include lived experts. And so we really have to make an organizational change and a culture shift to bring youth voice or lived expertise to the table. You have to do some work. You can't just invite them in and not be ready to really listen to their voice and take their feedback and implement, you know, what they've recommended. And so that there's a couple different components to that. And then continuing to renew that commitment and implementation of shifting context. So making sure, we're going to talk a little bit later about trust building. And this is one of those pieces, really avoiding tokenism, inviting you to the table after you've already made a decision about what you're going to do is the antithesis of this work. So really making sure that you're coming to the table with a willingness to hear and listen and learn. So I am going to turn it over to Alex, who is going to talk a little bit more about our supports for foster youth.
Oh, thank you so much, Margot. Yeah, so hello, everybody. My name is Alexander Crossman. I am one of the lead ambassadors for the Youth Engagement Project at CFPIC. For those who haven't met me before, just a couple things. I am a former foster youth. Go shout out to Santa Rosa Junior College. I see that Candy and Rebecca and Yesenia are on here, and so it's amazing to see you guys again. I somewhat similar to Dr. Gonzalez. I entered the system very young at the age of 8. I actually went through 7 different homes when I was going through care, and thankfully I was able to, from many different avenues of support, be able to put myself together, and I was able to get my associates at the JC. I went to Sonoma State for my undergrad in finance. I got my master's in business, and I'm currently a PhD candidate at the University of the Cumberlands. So I'm very excited to continue to do this work and continue to support the community in every which way I can. I wanted to spend a little bit of time with you guys this morning, just trying to give you guys a little bit of insight on like what my role is at CFPIC. I actually oversee all of the youth engagement projects from the youth to the counties in Sonoma, Marin, and San Francisco counties. So kind of bumping over to this slide here, I just wanted to spend a little bit of time giving some context on what one of our youth has said recently that really touched me, and I thought would also be a great moment of context for you guys. So the quote is, "Being a part of YEP has opened many doors for me. The project has connected me with important people and organizations throughout the country. Through these connections, I have been able to volunteer at local events, participate in reformative discussions, and even been given guidance on pursuing my career path. I am looking forward to what the future holds during my time with YEP." So when we started working on YEP, it was a bit of kind of like goulash, right? We were kind of doing a lot of everything, and we didn't know exactly what the project was just in front of us in Sonoma County. And as we spent more time figuring out exactly what our goal and mission was, because each county is a bit different, they have different leads and different individual ambassadors in order to acknowledge what the team needs. We were able to finally like get together and finalize a lot of our missions. So things like onboarding and training we found to be super important. Coaching from other lived experts. Margot made a really good point earlier, the tokenism. I cannot tell you how many times I've been a part of a conversation, which, as soon as I walk in the room, I realize that the decision was already made. So we wanted to support our, Sonoma County culture and other counties' culture in developing systems that are going to be beneficial for both the county and also the youth, so that it is a win-win for everybody, because it is important that everybody is getting on the same page here. Other things in pushing our youth forward into their permanent roles, whether it be with CFPIC or a different organization, we will absolutely support them in resume development, letters of recommendation. We constantly are seeking out internship opportunities for them. So we see this as an opportunity for them to grow and evolve in their current space as an ambassador, and also moving forward. So what is lived expertise? Lived expertise really refers to the unique ability to translate a personal experience to impact meaningful system change. Developing lived expertise is a process that takes ongoing training, support, and skill building. It is one thing for a lot of our youth to actually distill down what they've experienced, and it is another thing to take that and actually make it a presentable item where they can make change with it, because that is a skill in itself. The amazing things that they're able to put together through a little bit of refinement is really fantastic, and that's what we're noticing in our programs. So why do we partner with individuals who have had expertise to inform and guide us of our work? Throughout my experience, both as a former foster youth and also a professional working in this capacity, there are blind spots on both sides of the table. And realistically, I think it's most important that we acknowledge all these different blind spots and acknowledge all of these different avenues in which this person may be feeling or may be coming from. And there's oftentimes unseen just the unknowns, right? There are some things that we know that we don't know, and then there's also items that we don't know that we don't know. And that's what sometimes difficulty of working in this work is. So having more food for thought at the table is always great. So, what does partnership with youth and young adults look like? So, on one hand, it's going to be lived experts, right? Actually distilling them into an individual project or a job in order to impact that particular outcome. The other one is the general partnership. So, creating a connection between CFPIC, who has multiple youth, and also bringing that lived expertise is able to marry together a really, really good message and impact multiple projects at the same time and actually support the county and the youth developing at the same time. So engaging lived experts, we always try to focus on what we reference internally called LEARN, which is learning and listening, engaging and empowering, authenticity and allyship, respect and rights, and networking and nurturing. So those are all super important to us, and those are our guiding principles in how we make decisions and how we move forward with any project. And next one here is, what ways are you already engaging with lived experts to improve your current work? I wanted to add this question in here particularly because I've always find this to be like a food for thought idea. I think it's so easy for us to all acknowledge like this person has contributed in this fashion, this person has contributed in this fashion, and there's so many amazing people who work in this community, and I see how hard everybody's working, and I know how hard it is to sometimes slow down, take a deep breath, and try to think about things from a bigger picture. And so I encourage all of us to sometimes take that little bit of a step back and be like, how am I coming at this problem? Am I coming at it with all the tools necessary to make the best outcome? And so this question was meant to do that of, are we maybe missing a component here? And then we have, oh, I think are we still showing learn? Sorry, the next one was the quote that I had for you guys. On the right, yep. There we go. So that was the one that I had brought up. So I apologize. I was looking on the other screen here at the slides. So yeah, what ways are you already engaging with lived experts to improve your current work? I always recommend just taking a step back and trying to think about that the best that you can, okay? And then finally, just the next one here was we had a Q&A all set up for you guys. And then also our contact info in case you had any questions or concerns or wanted to get a hold of us. We'd love to work with you guys. We are constantly looking for new projects to work on. We have a couple of amazing youth, especially in Sonoma County, that I work with closely. Marin County and San Francisco counties are also amazing. And if you aren't from those three counties, say you're from Napa County, we would love to partner with you guys and to start working with you guys. So please reach out to Margot or I, and we would love to connect.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Margot and Alex. Now let's hear from our partners at Pivotal, and I'll pass the mic over to Ashley.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I am Ashley Matisiak. I'm the Director of Program Partnerships at Pivotal, and I just wanted to take a couple of minutes to just share a little bit about Pivotal and what we do. Pivotal is a nonprofit organization primarily serving students in San Mateo and Santa Clara counties. And if you could just go to our next slide, I can share with you guys our mission and vision, which there's just a lot of overlap in what I do and lots of things coming up. Anyways, I'm excited to jump into the panel. But our mission is that we support young people in and from the foster care system to realize their education and career goals and ensure their equitable access to opportunity. And then if you could go to the next one, wanted to just share a little bit about Pivotal's values and how we approach our work. Some really just sort of fundamental things about Pivotal and our work are that we very much believe in the potential of young people from foster care. We know that there is a real need for equity and for more equity in them receiving services and connecting to the things they need in order to reach their goals. And everything that we do at Pivotal is really centering in relationships and the belief that folks heal from trauma and realize their true potential through healing relationships. So all of our work is centered around that. And in our approach with the students that we serve, we implement a really youth-led approach. So a lot of what Alex and Margot was just saying really resonated. And that's true at Pivotal sort of throughout sort of every kind of level of the organization, in the way that we engage young people in our services and having folks with lived experience on our staff and also in leadership positions on our board. And through our alumni network that also continues to inform our work. We also utilize a strength-based approach in our work, and that doesn't mean ignoring the very real challenges that students are facing, but it really means looking at what are the skills and strengths of a young person, and how do we use those things to help you overcome those challenges? How do we build on those strengths and continue to increase your skills and capacities? And then Pivotal, we just celebrated our 35th anniversary last year. So we've been working in the community doing this work of serving young people from care for a long time. And along the way, collecting a lot of data on what's been working for students and really evolving. So we've done a lot of learning over these last 30 plus years, and really in refining our model and how we serve young people. So a little bit more about what that is, what that exactly looks like. At Pivotal, we start serving students as early as their 8th grade year of middle school, and then continue to support them through the completion of their first bachelor's degree, or whatever their post-secondary degree goal is. So we're looking to engage students in a pretty long-term capacity. Students don't have to come to us at any particular time, so they don't have to start with us then. Certainly students come to us and start with us at some point in their post-secondary journey or any other point along the way. We also don't have any kind of age cap on our program. So even if students have maybe emancipated from care, maybe taking a break from school or whatnot, if now is their time to come back and are wanting to get into higher education and they're looking for some support, then Pivotal is looking to be a place to support them in that. We primarily support students through individualized one-on-one coaching. And through that individualized coaching relationship, students are doing skill building and setting goals for themselves about what they're wanting to achieve around their education milestones, and also looking ahead around their career goals. And then a really important component of what Pivotal does is really working with the other supporters and services and systems that young people from care often work with. Dr. Gonzalez talked a little bit about the many systems that young people from care are interacting with. And so at Pivotal, we really work to make sure that we don't have any kind of ego around supporting students. And so if a young person has a really great connection with a teacher or a caregiver or someone else on campus, an ILP case manager, a social worker, again, one of the many other sort of systems, folks that they're connected with, then we really want to support that relationship. And if Pivotal takes sort of a little bit of a backseat role to help connect them, to help make sure that they just are aware of what services are out there, then we're really happy to do that. And bringing some of those team members together, along with centering that scholar around what their goals are and how they want the folks in their lives to support them, again, is a really like foundational part of how Pivotal's services go. And then on top of the one-on-one coaching, we also provide scholarship funding for those students who are pursuing post-secondary education. We again operate primarily in Santa Clara and San Mateo counties, so young people are eligible for our services if they have spent at least one day after their 13th birthday in foster care, and if their foster care or dependency case was from Santa Clara or San Mateo counties, but they're now living elsewhere. Maybe they've decided to pursue higher education outside of one of our two counties. Maybe they've been placed with relatives or other kind of housing placement outside the county. Our services can follow them. And so even if you are not somebody who's working directly in San Mateo or Santa Clara counties, if you have young people that you're working with or students that you're working with whose foster care cases were from one of those two counties, they would be eligible for our services. Of course, our services are voluntary, and so we always ask students once they're referred, if they're not the ones who've referred themselves, what we have to offer and if that feels like a good fit for them. And so they have to be wanting to, work with a Pivotal coach in order to be eligible, of course, as well. And then again, we don't have any kind of age cap on our services. I won't go through all of this, but you guys will receive all of these slides, and this is just the contact information for our enrollment coordinator, Sue, who's always happy to take any questions. We know that sometimes young people's experiences through child welfare is complex, and so if there's any questions about sort of their eligibility or even just our services in general, you or young people themselves are welcome to contact Sue. But we just have a simple referral form on our website where a young person can refer themselves or where any, adult supporter can refer them to our services. And then we'll reach out pretty quickly to both the person who referred as well as to the scholar to chat with them about what they're looking for and to make sure our services are going to be a right fit. We do require that students submit a copy of their dependency verification letter, and that's something we can help with to just confirm their foster care status, but also to make sure that that's just important documentation that they have access to, since we know that's so important as they continue to pursue post-secondary education and accessing, the other resources that are out there for them. And then this, again, I won't go through all of this, but just since you all will be receiving these slides, just some key contact information for folks in our organization, including myself. I think that's all I had for you all. Like I said, just a quick overview of what we do at Pivotal, and just wanted to extend my appreciation to you all for your interest in supporting young people from CARE and for the work you're doing. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Ashley. Last but definitely not least, in terms of our partners who are going to be talking a little bit about their work, we have Chrissy from Hannah Academy.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Chrissy Brady. I'm the Director of Special Education at Hannah Academy Non-Public School. And I do come from that educator special education lens, not necessarily from a foster care lens. However, I do have those connections to the foster care system. And when you look at foster youth, just by definition, you have been impacted by trauma. And anyone impacted by trauma, anyone in the foster care system is disproportionately affected by emotional disabilities. And that is a qualifying condition for an individual education plan or a special education in general. So that's really where we come in. We have a very small school. We work with the top 1% to 3% most challenging students. I love our school. I think it's amazing. Lots of people hear about our school and they're like, why can't my kid go there? I'm like, you don't want him. Because we work with some challenging kids. But those highs of when they work, that's why we do it. It's because when the things work out and it all makes sense and you see those bonuses, that's why we do it. Approximately 10% of our current population are either current or former foster youth. So 10% of our population are impacted with emotional disabilities related to some of their traumatic experiences. But let's get into it. What on earth do we actually do and why do we do it? So let's go ahead and next slide. Here at Hannah Academy, we believe that through empowerment, education, caring, and providing opportunities for students to learn and grow and realize their potential by developing academic, social, and vocational skills. And really, I just want to focus on that academic, social, and vocational skills focus because we tie all three of those together to try and bring students' understanding of why do we do school? What is the point of school? And why continued education is so important is because that helps you earn your goals. That helps you get that job, that helps you get that money and that stability of a life that a lot of our students are desiring for after high school. Next slide, please. So consider all of that within the lens of a learning disability. If you have a learning disability, every single time you change classes, every single time you enter a new environment, whether that be a work environment, a new home environment, a new community support environment, the rules change. The rules for behavior, the rules for success, the rules for how do you interact with anyone, all of those rules change. So with a student with any form of learning disability, regardless of what it is, a specific learning disability, if they're on the autism spectrum or emotional difficulties, you have to learn a new set of rules every single time. So the amount of intellectual, emotional, and cognitive work that you're doing just to enter a new environment is tremendous. And I know our other speakers have spoken to the importance of building that relationship and building trust. That is absolutely critical because that's how you relax them down from what is a fight or flight response. So let's move on to the next slide, please. So if the rules change with every new environment, we change the rules. Go ahead to the next slide. So if you just keep doing what has been done all the time, nothing is ever going to change. I forget who said that, but it is kind of insanity. So everything we do, everything is incorporated with trauma-informed care. Now, trauma-informed care, it does kind of get a bad rap if it's implemented poorly. I absolutely agree with some of the negatives of it. But when you do it really well, it does have long and impressive impacts, positive impacts. They need to be grounded in the understanding of what is the physical response to trauma. We work with both the physical, psychological, and emotional safety of not only the survivors of trauma, but also the providers. Providers, everyone in this Zoom room who supports, you are impacted by secondary trauma as well. And we want to create opportunities so that everyone can build or rebuild a sense of control, a sense of empowerment over themselves and their future. So we do that in a few different ways. Go ahead and move on to the next slide. First thing we do differently is, and all of this is based on research and data. I should always say that. Our motto here is really data determines goals, which determines services. So if as a support provider, you're coming up against anyone that's saying, well, no, we can't get you that service or we can't open that door. The key to opening those doors is data and information. That's how you open those doors. Any roadblock, that information is truly power. So what we did is we took all of our existing staff at a former private school that were very well trained in trauma-informed education, and we actually sent them back to school to get their special education credentials and layer that on top. So between our main staff, we have well over 100 years of masters, doctorates, classroom-based research. We are the experts in trauma-informed education. So go ahead, next slide. So those experts, we designed a new school entirely. And we really follow the mantra of Dr. Nancy Dome. And this tool is one that I use every single day. She calls it her RIR protocol, and for recognize, interrupt, and repair. And she originally developed this to approach systemic racism and how do you fight that? And the first step is to recognize that something is going on, whether it could be something wrong, could be something right, but recognize that there's something going on here that's not as it should be. Interrupt that. And it could be a positive interruption or a negative interruption, but you got to stop that where it is. And then you have to do the repair. If you don't close that circle by, repairing, whether it be a relationship, whether it be an assignment in school, and repair by getting accommodations to actually successfully complete that assignment and understand that skill. Or maybe it's physically repair something because you broke it, you picked up something and threw it when you were mad. So we do all of that through our academics, we do that with our behavior system, and we also do that with career and technical education. All of these elements of our program run under that trauma-informed framework, with recognize, interrupt, and repair being our main mode of working. So in academics, maybe we recognize that a student is struggling, got to recognize it and then interrupt it. So why are you struggling? Did you get enough sleep? Kind of start with the physical, very Maslowian, not sure how you say that. The physical elements. Did you need water? Can I get you a snack? Are you hungry? Then going into the emotional level. Well, is that fool acting a fool and distracting you? Well, let me see what I can do about that. Do you need to take a break? Let's go try some self-regulation strategies. Do you need more academic accommodations that we can support you with? Building in those supports with that interrupt and then coming back to repair is key. We do that with behavior and we do that with our career skills. Let's keep going. No, that's good. Forget that slide. Keep moving. Thank you so much. And we do this with skills-based grading. Everything we do, behavior has the same score, academics have the same score. And what I want to point out as a tool for the people in this room is we don't grade by traditional concepts of an A being a 90%. Here, an A is going above and beyond what you're expected to do. Here, just doing exactly what we ask you to do, that's doing your job. That's, you do your job, you get to keep your job. That's a B, actually, or a 3. And we determine that with behavior as well. With this, we start building those connections between school and the real world, because this grading system that incorporates all of the standards is also used in our career and technical education program, where we teach health, which is really first aid and CPR, culinary, which is really that culinary industry, not just a cooking class, introduction to technology for industry, as well as construction trades, because we want to make those connections between academics and the real world, bringing all of our students through with that trauma-informed lens and support so that they can be successful in whatever it is that they choose to move forward and do. So let's keep going, because I know I'm short on time. What we do is make school accessible. That's all special education is really reducing access barriers. Whatever challenge a student might face, we work with them and their IEP teams to address the root cause of what's really going on to move towards that future without barriers. So let's keep going. This is what some of our students have said. If you need help with an assignment, they help you understand it and walk you through it. It's much more flexible school because we're working with the students that we start where they are and we help support them through what they need to learn. And the teachers care about you and that they always try to keep you on task. We try, we don't always succeed, but we definitely always try. And they reward you, and the school is fun too, and the teachers are funny. That's about that relationship building. We start building trust. We have a student right now who came to us approximately 2 weeks ago. He is a day student, but he lives in an STRTP. He is a current foster youth, and he is not adapting to traditional school. He's not what we call an expert student. And I was giving a tour, and he came up to the tour, and I was like, uh-oh, how's this gonna go? And he said, I swear I'm not making this up, it's a good school. The teachers are really respectful to you. And I was just flabbergasted. He understands, he's getting it, that when we respect him, that we are working with him to get him where he wants to go, and we'll work with him on his timeline. And that kind of perspective, that is what's key to building that relationship and supporting your students, however you're supporting them, whether in the classroom, as a CASA worker, as a foster care provider, anywhere. It's that relationship that really matters. So let's move forward. I did it. Back to you, Leo.
Well, thank you so much, Chrissy, and thank you to our panelists who went over their few slides. So that is really our grounding. We can get straight into the main event. And with that being said, I'll have the privilege to introduce you back to Sam and Julissa, who will be leading our conversation today. So Sam and Julissa, mic off to you.
Awesome. Thank you, Ugo. And I think it's great to hear as well, just kind of the range of our own experiences working with foster youth. I know for myself, I'm still in the very beginning stages, so I'm really excited to have the chance to co-moderate this panel with our 4 experts that you had a chance to hear from earlier. I wanted to just share a little bit about what our panel looks like today. We have 3 main topics we'll be covering, which are a sense of belonging, accessing higher education, and college success and persistence. And we'll also have a welcome question just to ground all of us, as well as a closing out question on the theme of joy. I also want to highlight, I see you all adding comments, thoughts in the chat. Please continue to do so. If you have questions that come up, if anything resonates with you, if you want to share emojis, we love to see it in the chat as well throughout this. We'll hopefully have time for Q&A at the end, but in case we don't get to your question, we'll do our best to answer it in the chat or add it to our resource doc at the very end. I think those are all my things just to cover. So I'm going to go ahead and pass it to Julissa to introduce herself.
Thank you, Sam. So once again, my name is Julissa Vargas, and I work with our community college team here at 10,000 Degrees. I would just like to take a moment to reintroduce our 4 amazing panelists. We already heard a little bit from them, but we have Margot. We have Margot from CFPIC, Alex from CFPIC as well. We have Ashley joining us from Pivotal and Chrissy from Hannah Academy. Well, thank you so much. I'm very excited to learn a little bit more about your experiences, your stories, and just some strategies that we can really take with us to closely work with our foster youth. I will go ahead and pass it on to Sam for our first section.
Awesome, thank you. And for our first section, we have our welcoming question. We also invite our audience, if you may be working with foster youth in any capacity, if you want to answer this question as well in the chat. But for our next slide, our question will be, what do you enjoy about your work and working with foster youth? I think it's great. We got to hear a lot about the work that you do. So I'm excited to hear more about, what inspires you in the work that you do. And as we all pop up on the screen, I will go ahead and kick it off to Margot if you want to start us off with this question.
Great. Thank you so much, Sam. So for me, I really stumbled into social work and working with youth in the foster care system about 25 years ago. And honestly, it has been the most rewarding work that I could ever do. Youth that have been in foster care have experienced things that would break most people, and they are so incredibly resilient. They just amaze me every single day. And now I have the pleasure of working with the Youth Engagement Project and making sure that they have their voice at the table to be able to change the outcomes that maybe weren't in place for them when they were in care. And so it's really an honor for me to be able to work with these young people.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And I'll go ahead and pass it to Alex if you'd like to share.
Yeah, totally. That was a fantastic answer, Margot. I don't know how I'm gonna keep up with that. So for those who don't know me, I of course work with CFPIC. I also work for Valley of the Moon in the county of Sonoma as a residential care counselor. So I get to see a lot of the youth from a different angle as well, right? And so the reason why I got back into this is I spent a decade working in business. I got my undergrad in finance and my MBA, and I realized like all jobs to some extent are going to be a bit of a grind at the end of the day. And I realized like the grind that I was doing was not anything I really cared for at all. And I was doing all this contract work on the side with CFPIC, and I said, man, like I actually just really love to do that. Why don't I just do that? Why am I trying to force something that isn't working? Right. And so I ended up applying for Valley of the Moon. And between working at CFPIC and Valley of the Moon, I feel like I have been able to just experience a very, very awesome side of this entire system and seeing what is working, what is not working on so many different layers and different parts of the system. And so I get a huge sense of joy of being able to bring my experience back, but also getting to see, I think, all the different types of youth, all the different things that come up, and getting to see these people grow over the years.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like relationships and seeing that over time is such a beautiful thing. So thank you. And I'll pass it to Chrissy.
I want to echo what Alex said about that. And the change over time is really the single greatest reward. There's kind of a cheesy analogy in education that educators and teachers are gardeners. We plant the seed and we don't always see the plant grow or flower. We're not around for that because the kids move on. And me teaching and working at the high school level and older, I get to see the benefit of all that hard work from the amazing teachers and supporters and families before me start to pay off with those kids' maturity and ability to use those good strategies that they've been trying to teach. Everyone has been trying to teach these kids, all kids, for a long, long time. So when the kids say, any child goes, oh, that's easy, I get it. And it's such an underwhelming moment for them. They're like, oh, it's easy, I get it. But it's such a huge high for me and the support around them of going, oh my gosh, you get this one concept, but I'm not sure you understand the enormous strength and growth you've just made in being able to say that. And it's that high that you get from that is why I adore what I do.
I love that. I think it shows too, like the important steps along the way, that like every role is also important along the journey. And I'll pass it to Ashley to close us off with this question.
Yeah, yes to everything my peers have said. I think for me, on a sort of personal and maybe somewhat selfish note, I get a lot of energy from working with young adults and folks who are in this really, sort of amazing time in their lives as they're looking to sort of discover who they are and what their goals are, and the sort of transformative power of higher education for them to really understand so much more about themselves and to do healing. And so to be sort of a piece of that and part of sort of that young adult journey, I think is really energizing. For me, this work is also very much grounded in social justice work. The vast majority of young people in foster care are people of color. They come from families who have been socially, economically disadvantaged, who are immigrant families. They are the most vulnerable families in our community who our social safety net systems have failed in lots of ways. And so there are, for me, no more deserving young people for our community to invest in and to uplift than young folks who have experienced the foster care system. And so investing in them and in helping them to pursue their goals and to access higher education and economic mobility is really powerful work.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you all so much for sharing. I think this was a great way to just get us started and thinking about how we are supporting foster youth. And I think through your presentations and your answers, I feel like we get to see a lot of that. So thank you. And I'm going to pass it on to Jaleesa to kick us off for our first main topic.
Once again, thank you for sharing, especially Chrissy, what you said about us being educators, being gardeners. It really resonated because a lot of the times it does feel like that. And just as we're getting into these responses, I'm very excited to go into this next section, which is sense of belonging. Like Dr. Daisy Gonzalez mentioned, a lot of these students are looking for healing spaces. So this is why we really wanted to like highlight this section and just go a little bit more into depth. So we can go ahead and go to the next slide. So to begin this section, the question is, from your experience, how does supporting foster youth students differ from students who have not experienced the foster youth system, especially when we think about accessing post-secondary education? And then we'll go ahead and get started with Margot.
Thank you. So I'm going to answer this question fairly briefly and sort of defer my time to those that are actually providing more of that educational work. But from my 23 years in working in the child welfare system, the greatest difference for me is the support network that youth need to be able to get to post-secondary education. For many of our kids in foster care that have had multiple placement changes, they've had multiple schools. Without that support network dedicated to ensure that they're getting the credits they need when they transfer, that's helping them, get into the right classes when they have to move again. And an adult supporter who is following up on their grades and making sure that they're turning in their homework. Those things are critical for all adolescents. I mean, I have 4 children. 1 has graduated from college, 1 is in college, and 2, God willing, will get there, but they are killing me. And I have to every single day be checking their work, making sure they're on task. And so for youth, whether they're in foster care or not, who don't have adults in their lives that are providing that support, it's really challenging to make it to the next level. So for the counselors, the teachers, all of those, the social workers, it really takes a village to wrap around young people to get them across the finish line.
Thank you, Margot. And definitely you're a strong soldier because raising 4 is a big challenge. And Alex, if you want to go ahead and add to this question, and then we'll pass it on to Chrissy.
Yeah, totally. I think a lot of it, from what I see, is a lot of struggles with impersonation. They don't see themselves as this individual who can be successful, right? And so I see a lot of people who aren't able to necessarily unwind from their former selves and actually be able to allow themselves to, like, I am the person that is successful. I am the one that's getting this degree, right? Rather, they walk off that stage at the end of the day and they feel like they're the same person just with a piece of paper, but it's not really something they earned. And so I think developing that sense of confidence in terms of like, no, this is really who I am. This is who I'm turning into, and owning that is something that is amazing.
Thank you, Alex. And then Chrissy, if you want to go ahead.
Yeah, and I agree with Alex. I feel for Margot. I've got 3 kids at similar ages, and God willing, I won't kill them. But we'll get there. With students looking at accessing post-secondary options, if you're a first generation, it's tough to begin with. If you are anyone who doesn't have any experience with that world, and you might even have some imposter syndrome going on of maybe you don't feel like you belong in that world, I cannot stress enough the importance of a warm handoff. Not just saying, hey, call this number, here's this pamphlet, or click on this link, but go with them. Schedule a visit and go take a tour if you can on club day so that they can see the kind of clubs and the support clubs that are there and start making those connections in real time so they can start seeing themselves as that student of the future. There's a couple clubs I know at Santa Rosa Junior College and College of Marin, or Marin College, sorry. The Rising Scholars Program in particular has additional counseling that is specific to the needs of their population, where it's much more tailored and it's much more personal, especially if you're going to a bigger college. Think of their counseling departments, it's huge, and you just get whoever's working that day. But especially at the community college level, it's smaller, more tailored, more easy to understand. And if you're making those connections with people with similar backgrounds through those clubs, building those trusted relationships, you're more likely to ask questions of like, hey, I went to class and it said the teacher was sick and the class is canceled. Does that mean forever? Because we've had a student do that. And they failed the class because they didn't know that he was sick just that one day. And they never came back after that. We have to do that warm handoff in mentoring of what is the world of post-secondary education, because it's not harder than high school, but it's very different than high school. And some students adapt well to that different and some students do not.
Thank you, Chrissy. And I 100% like support what you stated. You know, we have all these amazing resources on campuses. We just have to be able to also help our students transition. So thank you so much for that. And then Ashley, if you want to go ahead and answer our question.
Yeah, I mean, again, yes to everything everyone said. I would add that I think what I have seen scholars really need most in this transition is more individualized attention than you might expect your sort of average, sort of new college student to need. I think it's important for us all to keep in mind that for many of our folks who are in care, as they're graduating from high school and looking to start higher education, that is coming at a time for many of them of a lot of transition. It is not uncommon for folks to change housing placements during that summer between high school and their freshman year of college if they're making that sort of initial transition. Our folks have more complex family dynamics than your sort of average student. So there's a lot that they are sort of navigating in this transition phase. And so the more sort of individualized attention, exactly as Chrissy said, the more of the sort of like connections and warm handoffs that you can make. We all know that importance of getting students through those first sort of 30 units or so of college and how powerful that is to sort of like launching you. And so the more we can do to set students up for a really strong start and for connecting to those resources to kind of get through that sort of first hurdle of the first couple of semesters of college, I think is really important for our students.
Oh, Ashley, thank you so much. And your answer is really setting us up for the next question and building trust. Like, how do we get these students to first take this test, the first step, and really, disclose to us like, hey, I have been in the foster care system. So for a question, this one will be for Margot and Ashley. In our experience working with foster youth students on college and financial aid applications, we encourage students to self-disclose that they have or have been part of the foster system. However, we see many students who choose not to self-disclose, and I'm pretty sure a lot of people in the audience have had a similar experience, working in campuses and schools. So from your experience, what are some practices you have used to build trust, and what are the benefits for foster youth to self-disclose? And once again, this question is for Margot and Ashley. Whoever would like to go first.
Okay, I'll thank you. So I wrote my talking points and was listening to Dr. Gonzalez, who was just fantastic, by the way. And my first sentence here echoed what she said. Trust is not given, it must be earned, right? So I just want to underscore that point. I really believe in transparency as a cornerstone to build trust. So many of the youth that we've worked with have been let down by adults, right? That's sort of a theme. And so being patient and moving slowly and building a relationship. I run a summer camp for youth that are separated from their siblings due to their placement in foster care. And so many of our volunteers come into that work with their hearts in the right place, but really just expecting the youth to trust them and be grateful that they're there giving their time. And I'm like, oh no, that's not how it works. Come back 5 years in a row and then maybe they'll trust you. And so, and, I also try to recognize that just because I've been doing this work for over 25 years, it doesn't make me an expert. Like I wasn't in foster care. So while I understand it, I certainly have not lived it. And so also showing humility and vulnerability. When I make a mistake or I say something wrong, which I will do, I own it and I apologize. And I think that can go a long way.
Thank you, Margot. Go ahead, Ashley.
Yeah, I was just going to add to that answer. I think that that's all exactly true. I also think that we talk a lot with our coaches in terms of as they're forming relationships with students about the importance of persistence and consistency. And so, expecting that just because you've, picked up the phone and called somebody, or you've sent them an email and invited them to an event on campus or something like that, again, our students need more individualized attention. They need that persistence, right? Like probably that one phone call is not enough if they've never met you, if they've never been there, right? So more reassurance about what to expect, about who's going to be there, about what this is about, and a lot of persistence is really what starts to sort of build that trusting relationship. I don't think you have to I feel sort of pressured that I wasn't in foster care or I don't have similar life experiences. If you do, that can be really powerful. But I think just showing up as your authentic self and being, honest about who you are and what you're hoping to help with and what you can do. And I think on that note, also being really clear about what you can support with. And also really following through on what you say you're going to do. Exactly as Margot said, these are young adults who have been let down by a lot of adults in their lives in a lot of really important ways. And so it is so important that you do the things you say you will do. If you say that you can help with this application, if you say that there's this resource, that you follow through on those things. You don't have to be all things to all young people, but you do have to follow through on the things that you say that you will do. I think that's really critical in developing trusting relationships. In terms of self-disclosure, I think that young people from care are often asked very often about what their experiences have been, or people have questions or curiosities about those things, and they often feel really obligated to kind of get a little bit of sort of narrating of their life stories, which can be so painful and so difficult for many of our students. And so even a simple question around sort of like, were you ever in foster care or whatnot, like that can bring up a lot more than maybe folks kind of realize. As I shared earlier, Pivotal has a scholarship program, and this was many years ago, but as part of our scholarship program, we asked students a couple of like short answer questions to sort of tell us about themselves, as sort of similar to a personal statement. And one of our questions used to be something along the lines of like, tell us about, who you are and about your life. And it was meant to be something pretty general like that, but we were quickly finding that many of our students were interpreting that as, tell me about your foster care experience. And that was very difficult for students. And for some students, they chose not to apply because that was too intimidating to answer those kinds of questions. And so we made it really explicitly clear in our application that we want to know about you and your goals and what you're looking for. And we talk to students a lot about how you get to decide who you share your story with. And that is really important. Again, we talk to our coaches about when a young person chooses to disclose anything with you about their foster care experience, your role is to sit back and listen and to honor hearing that. And oftentimes to not ask questions and to not pry, right? Our goal in our work is to help students look ahead to what they want from themselves, right? We don't, are not in the role of providing therapy and helping students in that way, right? That's not our role. And many of our students are needing that support, but our role is to look ahead and for students to get to share with us what they choose to share about themselves and about their experiences is really important. And so I think when there are questions that are just needed, right, as part of our programs and financial aid applications and stuff like that, to sort of be able to identify students, it's really important that we help students to understand, again, that by checking that box or whatnot, that like they get to decide sort of how much or how little of their experiences they're sharing with other people.
Thank you for sharing that, Ashley. I feel like sometimes we have to recognize that we're stepping into the spaces, and some of us have these experiences of like, hey, I'm coming into this space, I have expectations, but we have to recognize that it's not the same experience for all students, especially our foster youth students. So I'll go ahead and pass it on to Sam for the next question.
Thank you. And I think what you all just shared kind of lends itself perfectly to this question, just continuing about building relationships with foster youth students. This question will be for Chrissy and Alex. And our question is, can you share with us how you have used trauma-informed practices to better support foster youth? And are there any strategies that we can start using right away to create a safe and responsive learning environment? And Alex, if it's okay, I can pass it off to you first.
Yeah, totally. Um, That's a great question. So what I find in many different capacities to be the most just the best response that I've given to most folks is actually being firm and fair. I think one of the ways that we have found that sending a lot of love in the direction of our youth is actually like supporting them and setting boundaries and like assisting them in developing those goals with them. I think over the years, I've noticed there has been, I think, just a subtle shift in like a little bit of an intimidation to be firm with some of our young people. And what I have found from my personal experience, but also seeing it as a counselor and supporting youth professionally, is that when you set the boundaries with them, it shows that you're invested in their success, that you're expecting them to do well and you want them to do well, and that you're going to make sure it happens with them rather than, stepping back and like letting them, fly or fail based on how whatever their skills are currently.
I think that's great because I feel like it shows like how we support them in the short term really emphasizes like how we're going to see results and support them in the long term for bigger picture. Thank you. And I'll pass it to Chrissy.
My principal is famous for his analogies, and he has one that kind of feeds off of Alex quite nicely. Is if you are locked in a room with no windows, no lights, and it's all dark, what's the first thing that you do? Is you stick your hands out and you start looking for the walls. You start trying to find your boundaries. And that's just human nature, is to reach out and ground yourself, to feel safe within your environment. And by providing boundaries, that is really what you're doing. And I wouldn't say like set, strict rules, but yeah, guidelines, because it's our job as support providers not to fix someone because they're not broken. And it's not our job to rescue them because they are not powerless. We need to help them build their empowerment by teaching them how to find their boundaries, how to say this is acceptable or this is unacceptable in appropriate ways so that they can control their fate. And I think that goes for every single student. But a lot of students haven't been, that's not something anyone is taught explicitly, I don't think, in school or in families, unless you're incredibly lucky. It's something that somehow we're expected to pick up all on our own just through life experiences. And when your life experiences are traumatic or limited to begin with just because of those sets of situations, odds are good you're not going to get that very specific support and that lens. I would also throw out, as far as a tool you could do right now, is I truly do live by that RIR protocol. Recognize that something's going on, interrupt that cycle and repair it. You always have to close that circle, very similar to what all my fellow panelists are saying, in that you have to follow through and do what you said you were going to do, especially in regards to supporting that student. So even if it's something like, hey, I see you're upset right now, I'm going to come back and check on you in about 10 minutes. You have to come back and check on them in 10 minutes. If it's something as far as like, hey, I'm going to make this phone call for you, you not only have to make that phone call for them, you have to tell them that you did. They will not assume that you did it for you or for them. Sorry.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like I like that we're hearing a lot of the same, like similar themes across the board of, following through and also empowering our students, and because they have the tools and we're very, strength-based and believe that, they have the ability already. So we're just kind of adding that extra support. So thank you so much. I'm going to pass it to Julissa for our next topic of the panel.
Now we will begin to transition into our second section. For us, it was very important to talk about like those high school years. They're such crucial years in the, in the life of our students. And sometimes, as Chrissy was mentioning, we're some of the educators that are present that students rely on for a lot of these things. So we would like to just begin with the first question. which is how can educators effectively collaborate with foster parents or caregivers to create a consistent and effective support system at home and in school? So, Christy, if you would like to get us started with this question.
Sure thing. I really have two suggestions. One, because teachers are already overworked, we're asked to do everything under the sun for our students. So we have to work smarter, not harder. And we're using Google Maps. You can create a map of resources specific to your area or your school district, your community, your county, and then you can share that link to a family and a student, and they have access to all the community resources that are specific to their needs forever, because it's Google and nothing goes away on the internet. So that's, if you do it once, then that's a resource you can share. Those types of things to help your families can be huge. I would also encourage, especially if that student has an IEP, but invite all stakeholders to all student meetings. In the terms of IEP meetings, the educational rights holder can invite anyone that has insight into that student's education and how the school and family and team can really work together to do better by that student and help that student succeed. The more it's very much, it sometimes feels like there's too many cooks in that kitchen, but sometimes the cook you didn't expect has exactly the ingredient you need to make this a success. So invite people to that table, make those introductions, those warm introductions, and keep inviting people to the table, keep following up and bringing them back. Even if maybe, you don't see their purpose just yet, it's going back to that seed growing. I don't know when that branch of support might need to come on back.
That is awesome, Chrissy. Especially thank you for letting us know about the resource. Like the Google Maps is something that we don't really think about, but that's really making it accessible to our high school students, which we all know they don't really like going into like Google Docs, or, they really like something that's very fast and accessible for them. And then if Ashley can also go ahead and, share a little bit more on this question.
Yeah, I'm glad, Christy, you talked a little bit about sort of the difference between a caregiver and an educational rights holder, because those are often different people, right? In most families, that's not the case, but for many foster youth, it's a biological parent who's still an educational rights holder, while they may have some other kind of caregiver. And so I think knowing sort of the difference, and for that particular young person, who those people are and what kind of, decisions they can help support with is often really important in figuring out what the resources are, if the student is needing to be assessed for special education, if they're considering a school placement change, and doing that best interest determination. Some of those kinds of things, it's really important to just know who's on the team, right? Oftentimes our young people in care have big teams, like Chrissy was referencing, and there are a couple of really good sort of different places that our systems have sort of created to kind of bring those team members together, whether it's at an IEP meeting or another school-based meeting. Through the child welfare system, many of our students are having child, family, and team meetings, CFT meetings, right? And so if those are opportunities to sort of hopefully invite yourself, if you're not already sort of part of some of those spaces, or to get, to link up with the youth to understand when those things are happening, so that you can understand who is around, who's supporting that young person, and what their role is, and what they can support with, because there are oftentimes different kinds of resources that you can sort of access, or different ways that folks can support, whether that's a wraparound mental health team who can maybe help with a little bit of school transportation sometimes, if that's been a challenge for students, getting them to and from school, or there's maybe an ILP case manager who can help with getting a student to a resource, or those kinds of things. So knowing who those team members are and sort of what role they can play can be a really effective way for partnering.
I totally love that idea, especially the creating community and knowing what role everyone has in that community and just expressing it to the student. So we're going to go ahead and move on to the next question. Okay, awesome. And this is going to be a little bit more data. It looks a little bit long, so just bear with me. So while a significant number of foster youth express high interest in post-secondary education, only a small percentage enroll and graduate. Data suggests only 20% of foster youth enroll in college, and graduation rates vary between 3% and 11%. This is significantly lower than the national average, with 60% of high school graduates enrolling in college. Let's just take a moment to sit with this. as someone that has worked with foster youth, I see a lot of these trends, but it's not until I really saw the data that I was like, wow, there's a very big gap between, foster youth students, attending college and actually graduating versus other students. So I would like to go ahead and ask, I'll go ahead and do Margot for this one. So what are some strategies and financial aid opportunities you would like to see educators use to help increase these percentage numbers in our local schools?
Yeah, thank you. I think first it's important, like Alex said earlier with the imposter syndrome, like making sure that all youth feel like college is attainable and it is something that could be in their future. And then I think it was Chrissy who mentioned, educators are tasked with so many different responsibilities. But how do we ensure that school counselors that are working with high school students are really well versed in those opportunities for youth in care, what scholarships exist, what funding they're entitled to? I don't claim to be an expert in that area. And I know there's a lot to sort of unpack with what's available. But just making sure that there's somebody that can help guide them. In San Diego County, they recently started a program a couple years ago called Fostering Academic Success in Education, or FACE, where they have embedded child welfare social workers in the high schools that have the largest population of foster youth. Those social workers are responsible solely for their educational outcomes. And they're really, they have small caseloads so that they can do all the follow-up, just to make sure that there's another adult helping to make sure that the youth are able to attain those educational outcomes. The first year of the program, they were just working with one school district, and I think they had like 100% graduation rate for the eligible youth. So identifying those support systems and making sure that we're putting a focus on youth being able to go to college. So the one other thing that I will add in talking to some of the youth in our program is making sure they understand the realities of college, what the funding will actually cover. We have one youth that shared with us, she didn't realize that when she went to community college, the funding didn't cover housing. And so she really had to scramble to figure out, where she could get that money. And then in addition, some of the funding, it's very specific for books or tuition or things like that. And so youth being able to have funding for food, for those other supplies, just making sure that they have a way to get those things, and connecting them to the Next Step, the Guardian Scholars, or those programs on college campuses. And then I had a note here, but I saw that Ken also put it in the chat, making sure that youth have a support network in college. The transition for many kids, whether they're in foster care or not, the transition from high school to college can be challenging. You have a ton of independence and a lot of freedom that maybe you didn't have in high school. There's oftentimes nobody looking over your shoulder to make sure you're going to class and turning in those assignments. And so if you're not doing those things, it's very easy to fail. And so making sure, again, that there is that support network for youth that are attending either a community college or four-year university.
I would add just two resources in particular, well, two things. One, we need to redefine what college is. Too many kids think college, oh, it's a 4-year, it's a degree, I get some job in an office, but it's also technical education, it's certificate paths, it's culinary degrees, it's becoming an EMT or a paramedic. There are so many more. College is so much broader than what a lot of students think about it. And then all students with disabilities and a whole slew of other folks qualify for services from the Department of Vocational Rehabilitation, or DOR, and you qualify for their services for life if you've ever had an IEP. And what they do is, all they do is job training. So if you want to go and become an accountant, they will help you with your accounting classes and they will pay for it. They will pay for the additional supports. They will pay for textbooks. They will pay for tuition. Maybe you want to learn how to be a contractor. They will help you with studying for the tests. They have so many resources that are not well tapped into because people don't realize they exist. Department of Rehab, it is kind of an old name and people think, oh, I don't need to go to rehab. And that's vocational rehabilitation. And they can cover the first 2 years cost of a junior college or community college, and years 3 and 4 for a 4-year college. They have a lot of resources. So Department of Vocational Rehabilitation, you can actually connect with in high school. But once you turn 18, get them on their radar and they will support.
Wow, Chrissy, thank you for sharing both. But Chrissy, thank you for that resource. I feel like, it's many times there's things we don't even know about, but this is why I love joining these webinars, because the more you know, the more you learn and the more you're able to support your students. I'll go ahead and pass it on to Sam for our next section.
Awesome. Thank you. For our last main topic, we want to touch on college success and persistence. And Margot, I think you touched on this perfectly, that, getting accepted to college and higher education after high school is just one challenge and one, triumph in itself. But navigating college and going all the way through graduation and post-graduation is a whole other ball game. So we have just a couple questions with time in mind that we're going to be asking, and we can go ahead to the next slide. And sorry, next slide after that, actually, we're gonna miss this question. But this question will be for Ashley, and of course, anyone else that would like to share, but kind of keeping in mind, thinking about financial costs and what that really means. Our students navigate a lot of different financial costs in addition to tuition. Margot touched on it perfectly, that's thinking about housing and food and materials that you need. Maybe what are some programs or partnerships that help ensure foster youth have that financial security throughout the school year? And, we're also thinking about things like stable housing year round as well.
Yeah, I mean, in my experience, what I found is that there are so many resources. Margot just dropped some really great ones in the chat around. There's more financial aid available to students from foster care than ever before. There's been such a great investment in our community college Next Up programs, as well as those foster youth specific support programs on the UC and CSU campuses that are all resources for students. Every county has an ILP program where students can access services at the very least up until the age of 21, if not beyond that. So in my experience, for most students, the issue isn't so much whether or not the resources are there, but it is around navigating them. All of these programs, even our state, financial aid programs that are so wonderful, have different eligibility criteria, right? Who is a foster youth based on the definition of FAFSA versus Chafee is different, and whether or not you qualify for Next Up or not, right? And so a lot of it is really helping students to understand what their situation was through foster care and what services that means they are or maybe not eligible for, and really piecing those services together, right, is a lot of the sort of the trick of navigating through higher education for a lot of our students, to be able to, again, sort of piece together those various resources. For students who are at university level, many of them can access year-round housing. It takes some advocacy, but the dorms are supposed to be available for students over, those breaks and summer, through winter and summer breaks now for students. Our students should be having priority access to housing through those time periods. That's relatively recent state legislation. All of our counties have THP and THP aftercare housing programs. So depending on their eligibility, right, working with young people again to understand what their situation was and to make sure, oftentimes those programs have wait lists depending on the county, but that they know that those are available to them, that they're on those, those lists to be able to access those services. So a lot of it is around sort of knowing what's in your community and just helping to connect students to that.
Definitely. Yeah, I feel like this is also like us as like educators or like people that are supporting in the community to also have our own awareness of what's available so that we can help navigate students to those resources. And we'll go to our next question. And this question is going to be for Margot and of course anyone else that would like to answer. But we have mentioned, mental health services and the importance of that type of safety throughout the presentation. We'd like to know, given that access to health insurance can be a barrier, what accessible and affordable mental health resources do you recommend or maybe know of that can support foster youth?
Yeah, thank you. This is a really timely question, given that May is Mental Health Awareness Month, and we know that this is a really important issue for current and former foster youth. I'm going to drop a link in the chat that is a guide to accessing mental health services under Medi-Cal that was created by the Youth Law Center. That might be helpful. But also, just remembering that Medi-Cal offers free health insurance to foster youth through age 26 and beyond if they meet income eligibility, which includes coverage for weekly therapeutic services. There's also an app called Saluna. Many of you have probably heard of that, but it's a newer, last couple of years, I think, app that offers free resources around mental health, that I know a lot of the young people that we work with have that on their phone and take advantage of that on a regular basis. Every UC campus has a counseling center that offers free therapy to students. Some campuses may have restrictions on the session frequency, but most allow weekly appointments. So that's another great resource. I know at UCSB, the Guardian Scholars Program, they contract with an LCSW who reserves 10 monthly spots for students. So I'm not sure if all universities, have something similar, but that's just another resource. And then some campuses have biweekly mindfulness workshops that are focused on healthy coping mechanisms that, can help youth that might be struggling and need some additional support.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you. I think it's so great to see just like the different types of resources available. And I also love that you mentioned Saluna. We recently just started like using that app and then kind of sharing it out with our students as well. And just for sake of time, we are going to close out this topic. But again, if you have questions in the chat, please add them. And we will pass it to Julissa for our closing question.
Okay. Thank you, Sam. So we just wanted to do a closing question. Basically, we call it closing out with joy, something that puts a smile on our faces. And this question is going to be for everyone. What is something that you have been feeling hopeful about in your work with foster youth? And we can start with Margo and then go down the line.
All right, thank you. So I feel so hopeful every day working with the 40 young people that we work with. I mean, you got to listen to Alex today, and I mean, he's pursuing his doctorate. Like, he couldn't be any more amazing. And so many of the young people we work with are doing just great things, whether they're traveling to DC to speak to Congress about foster care. They're being invited to really important conversations. And so every single day I get an email from somebody saying, I'm doing this, I've been asked to do this. And I just know that the work they're doing today is going to make the system so much better for tomorrow. So it makes me very proud of them.
As far as hopefulness for the future, it's not so much my hope for the future, but really seeing their hope for the future. That's what does it for me. And then just one last resource is, please don't forget about your local community library. They have amazing connections. It's a great place to meet if you're looking for a meeting ground. But they have educational help, tax help, bus passes. They have maps. It is an incredible resource that I found very helpful for keeping everybody connected and beyond just the school classroom. So it's a community classroom, a community setup, and a place where you can go where no one's expected to spend any money. So it seems much more accessible to a lot of people.
I also have so much hope and so much appreciation for living in California, where I feel like we have seen a state that's just made a lot of investments, especially in the last 10 years or so, in really hearing from young folks and families who've experienced the child welfare system around the work that we're doing in the state around prevention and alternatives in the child welfare system, diversion pathways, but also supporting those young folks who are going through the child welfare system in terms of, like I said earlier, more access to financial aid than there has ever been before for students from CARE. So just, yeah, a lot of really, amazing investments in making sure that there are resources there for students who are wanting to invest in themselves and to pursue post-secondary education. And for me personally, well, for all of us, I'm sure in our various roles, it's graduation season. And so I'm filled with just lots of pride for the Pivotal Scholars that we're working with who are graduating, lots of high school grads and post-secondary grads that we're celebrating. And so lots of encouragement to you all to connect with those students who are likewise, I'm sure, achieving those milestones.
Once again, thank you for sharing. I feel like everything that you all said really resonates with me, especially the going to the library. I love going to the library, and I feel like a lot of people don't realize how many great resources and events they have. But thank you so much for sharing. I'll go ahead and pass it on to Sam.
Thank you. I just want to echo what Julissa said. Thank you so much for sharing. This panel has been so helpful. I've been taking notes the whole time, and I'm excited to just watch this back as well. I know we're close to time, but I just wanted to highlight one question in the chat if any of you would like to address this. But it's from Ken, and it's what, from a systems perspective, is there a way to harmonize these foster youth definitions so it's more straightforward? If any of the three of you would like to take that one. Your best shot.
I have no answer for you, Ken. I'm so sorry. I really wish there was an easy answer, but I also don't wish, because the broader that we can be, the more more resources or the more opportunities we can provide. And that if we come to too narrow of a definition, we might actually pigeonhole some kids or close barriers. So I totally hear you with, man, I wish this was easier and there were fewer acronyms and really just get everybody together, but let's also keep it wider.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, Chrissy. I think it's a tricky thing because it's so linked to so many sort of different systems and what they've defined, and changing that would be a big undertaking. I think worthwhile probably, but I agree with broadening it. And I would also say my hope is for more supports for those students, even whose foster care cases who have closed or who have emancipated out of care. I think a lot of times those kiddos who maybe reunify with family members, or they've found permanency through either guardianship or adoption or whatnot, which is wonderful, and certainly we know leads to greater stability and better educational outcomes. But that does not fully sort of resolve all of their needs for services. And so broadening all of our sort of programmatic sort of definitions of who is sort of a current or former foster youth, and making sure that even those students have access to our services, to Chrissy's exact point around sort of broadening those definitions, is something I'm hopeful we can get to.
Thank you. I think you both did a great job answering your question. That was tough. And thank you, Ken, for the question. I'm going to pass it to Jaleesa for some final thoughts and then back to Ugo.
Okay, well, we just wanted to take a moment to really thank you all for joining us and being part of this important conversation. You know, a huge thank you to our 4 panelists for sharing your time, your insights, and your experiences. And similar to Sam, I have like a paper that I'm like writing all these amazing resources in. But once again, thank you. And then I'll go ahead and pass it on to Ugo for our final poll.
Well, perfect. Well, I want to thank once again our panelists and Sam and Jaleesa for leading the conversation. I also want to thank our audience members. It's 11:01 and many of you are still here. There is a final poll, but again, our biggest takeaway for today, as we conclude with Joy, is to continue that conversation, being that hope, that light for our students who at times they never say thank you. They never need to, of course, but we're there behind them and supporting them along the way. And so just to conclude here, we'll close the poll, but just as a reminder, we do have our scholarship. It does open between October and March. But if there's ever questions about, did I miss the deadline? Can our foster youth or our students still apply? Please have them do so. And they can always reach out to us. You're always welcome. We are a resource to you, our community, as well to our panelists, that if there's any support that we can provide, we are here and happy to support in any way that we can. So with that being said, I did put in the chat one last resource around scholarships specifically for foster youth. It is a combination of many scholarships that was shared with us and many who attended the JBay conference this past October. So we will be sharing these resources to you all. But once again, thank you for being here. Thank you to our amazing panelists. And we conclude today with so much joy and hope for the work that we do. So I appreciate everybody. Have a beautiful rest of the day, beautiful rest of the week, and a beautiful rest of the month.